call the school board meeting to order. George, could you take roll?
Sure. Colonel Evans?
Here.
Mr. Grozan?
Here.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Here.
Mr. Miko?
Here.
Mr. Naso?
Here.
All present.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. District goals. We have 3 stated goals. We state our goals every board meeting. The first goal, of course, is student achievement, which we take very seriously. We take all our goals very seriously. But student achievement, financial prudence, and community involvement. And everything we do in this meeting and our focus are on those 3 goals, and we're accountable to those 3 goals every year. And we'll continue to be. I have no public comment. And with that, we'll move on to the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Naso. I have one item tonight. It's, the exhibit could also be found in Exhibit A, and also a presentation at your seats, as well as the presentation of the 5-year forecast. And I'm going to make my way to the podium. So the 5-year forecast, as you guys are probably already aware, is something that by law through Ohio Department of Education, we have to do twice a year. Once in October as our budget's being set, and then again in May as an update to the October as we're finalizing the fiscal year. So this is the new one for the upcoming school year, fiscal year 17. So the format is we're going to have 3 years of actual, the current fiscal year, which is 2017, and 4 years of projections. The format, I've kept it relatively the same as before. We're going to go over the major assumptions, general fund revenues, general fund expenditures, and then the summary at the end. Moving into the assumptions, for revenues, our property tax collection rate, the forecast assumes that the collection rate will remain at the same level as 2015, the calendar year 2015, which was 96.6%. We're still in 2016's calendar year, so this is the latest information we have. A 1% change in collection rate represents about $500,000. In 2015, Cuyahoga County completed its triennial update, which resulted in a 1.7% increase in property valuations. The property valuations were updated for the 16 forecast. In March 2012, residents renewed a 5-year 6 mil levy with collections beginning in January 2013. The forecast assumes that the levy will expire in tax year 2016, but collections will continue through December 31st, 2017. I think as everyone's aware that we're on the ballot in November for this, this November, issue 120. State funding, the forecast assumes that in fiscal year 16, 3.6 million of TPP funding, of which 600,000 will be eliminated in fiscal year 17, and then the remaining 3 million will be eliminated in fiscal year 18, for a total loss of TPP funding of 3.6 million each year thereafter. And then enrollment, the forecast assumes a 1 to 2.5% annual decline in enrollment. For the forecast, the enrollment decline doesn't impact funding since at the state level we're on a guarantee. Major assumptions continued, expenditures. Within the general fund, the staffing levels. During 2016, the fiscal year which just passed, we had 672 positions budgeted in the general fund, which was a decline from fiscal year 15, the year before, of 20 positions. And for the current year, we have about 649 positions budgeted, which is a 23 position decline from last fiscal year. And in the out years, next fiscal year, we have 5 positions decline, and then fiscal year 19, 9, where it levels off at about 635. And these may fluctuate based on how enrollment decline continues, or if we see an uptick or decrease. So depending on how enrollment is, but this is based on our current projections.
George,
Yes.
I know that we've stayed in percentage-wise, with enrollment and staffing, we've stayed in that same percentage band.
Right.
Does this is the same assumption, correct? This doesn't accelerate reductions in staffing ahead of enrollment decline, so this keeps it right in sync, correct? Okay.
Yeah. The forecast assumes all union agreements as currently defined. And then last school year, we closed this building, Zellers, as an elementary building, converted it into an office. In 17, going into this year, we've closed Drake Elementary and consolidated 2 middle schools into a brand-new middle school. For our healthcare rates, they're forecasted to increase 10% each year for fiscal year 17 through 21. In fiscal year 16, we saw a 3% increase. The 10% I'm getting, that's from industry standards. Hoping that comes in a little less than the 10%. Hopefully it's something closer than we saw in 16. I'll find that number out next month or the end of this month as we're starting to get into our open enrollment period, which is going to take place in November. So we'll have a better indication of what our premium is for next year. But right now it's 10% for next year and year after. And hopefully we see it come lower, but even in the out years, it could. We had a couple good years. So as the consultants tell me, we're bound for an increase down the road. So it could be above 10, it could be under 10. So I think that's a safe assumption for now. And then the forecast also assumes a $500,000 technology increase to the budget that went into effect this fiscal year 17 through 21. That's $500,000 each year, and it's going to our technology initiatives such as the one-to-one technology. So moving on to our general fund revenues. So this graph illustrates where the money comes from. Overall, we receive about $71.5 million in the general fund. Of that, that's made up of 68, of the 71.5, 68.5 is made up of local property taxes, or $49 million. Then our second biggest chunk is the state foundation, which is $9.9 million, or 13% of the total. And then our state of Ohio reimbursement, which is the credits to the taxpayers for the homestead and rollback. That makes up 8.5% of the total, or $6 million. And then our TPP that's currently being phased out, right now it makes up 4.2% of our total, which that's going to be gone next year. And right now it's $3 million. And then our TIF revenues make up about 3%. They represent $2.1 million. Then all our other revenues, which is about $1.4 million, or 2% of the total, represent that. And those are made up of tuitions for preschool and kindergarten students, tuition from other districts, pay to participate, our new tech fees, catastrophic aid, and our Medicare reimbursement.
George, question. Maybe for Cameron. Have we heard anything about an appeal for the TPP funding? Is anybody thinking about going back to the legislature and back to the governor and saying, hold on there, wait a minute?
No, there's nothing yet. In fact, Jenny and I were down at a conference today, and they're talking about the concerns on the next budget because of tax changes and the tax that could be assessed on Medicare, that there's going to be a large decrease in the revenue of the state and how that will impact the next budget. So, no, there hasn't been any talk about appealing it. In fact, there's just increased concern about what that next budget will look like due to decreased revenue at the state level.
Okay.
When does that budget come out?
We should get preliminaries in the spring or over the summer. This current biennium ends this fiscal year, so the new biennium will go into effect next year.
Is
So
the tax on Medicare, is that part of Obamacare, or?
It's the federal, Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they said the federal government has come in and said that's an illegal tax and the state can no longer use it. And it equates to about a little over $500 million of revenue a year that's no longer going to be there for the state.
Okay, and will that depend on the outcome of the election here, whether that gets enforced or not?
They did not say that. It seemed like it was a done deal that they can no longer charge that tax on Medicare.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I have one other question. Have we received remuneration yet for Drake?
the proceeds?
Yes.
It hasn't closed.
No, not yet. We're expected to close on October 20th. We may have the deed on the agenda next board meeting for your
Okay.
approval. Moving on to the next slide. And then with the following slides, I have the graph on the one slide and the reconciliation of the changes on the following slide. So I'm just going to talk to the graph. So the first item is our property taxes. As you can see, in 2016, we received $49.8 million. In 2017, I'm estimating a little less, $48.9 million, and it's about $900,000 less. And majority of that's coming from a change in the collection split. Taxes are billed on a calendar year, and our fiscal years overlap 2 calendar years. So what we see a lot is in the commercial property area, sometimes businesses pay their entire bill either at the beginning or end of the fiscal year, where homeowners, the residentials, typically split it up and pay the first part of the calendar year, second half of the calendar year. What we ran into in 2016, they paid it all in the end of one calendar year and the beginning at the next calendar year, so that hit one fiscal year. So you can see it happen again in 14, where 14 was a little higher, then 15 was some of a decline, then 16 back up. So I'm anticipating the same thing happening, as it's kind of been trending that way. And then in 18, there's a slight decrease, which is due to the renewal levy coming off, and then 19, the full impact of that. So overall, pretty consistent. On a calendar year collection, it's just the timing of when it hits our books based on a fiscal year. Slide 10, state foundation revenue. As you can see, our state foundation has been pretty consistent. It's in the blue portion. We've been receiving $9.7 million since 2014, anticipating that again in 2017. We're what's a guaranteed district, and what that means is the state has their funding formula, they run their funding formula, and then it spits out a number where you should be. For us, it's saying that based on our numbers, it's less than what we received in the prior year, so the guarantee allows us to have the same level of funding as we've had the previous fiscal years. Our guarantee portion of this $9.7 million is about $3.3 million. That could be in jeopardy based on the next biennium budget. That's kind of been the hot topics that I've been hearing about. It's unlikely that they're going to wipe it all out. They might do some sort of phase out, but again, it's all unclear, all rumors. In the forecast, I put a 2% reduction each year, so that's where you see a little bit of a decrease to kind of be conservative. The red portion is a TPP supplement. So they eliminated the TPP reimbursement or phased it out to eliminate from the bucket that it's coming from and just supplementing it as part of the state foundation. Originally, it was supposed to come over 2 years, but now you're seeing the red in 3 years. What it is, in 2016, they gave us 80% of it in 16, with 16's portion, the remaining 20% in 17, and then same thing in 17. They're going to give us 80% of 17's in 17, and the remaining 20% in the following fiscal year. And then the blue is our casino dollars. That's been pretty consistent, around $260,000 to $270,000 each year. It's based on per pupil. The fiscal year 17 per pupil amount is going to be $51.35.
George,
Yeah.
on the state foundation money, the $9 million that comes in, that, is it possible, I mean, the state mandates that we do certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the lever that they hold.
Right.
Is there a way to evaluate or equate the mandates from the state against the money that we receive from the state? So
Sure there is.
if we're required to do a number of things by the state, and we receive this money from the state, it would be interesting to see what the cost of those items were against the money we receive.
Right.
So that we can determine the unfunded mandate portion of it, if that's the case, or whether, there's a surplus of that. So it'd be interesting to see that, because at some point, as these things go down, as the guarantee goes down, all these things, at some point, it may not be cost effective to take the money,
Right.
right? If they make us do more than what they require, than what they pay for, maybe at some point, we just decide, you know what, we're better off without it, because we can run this district at a lower cost without this, you know, proportional funding. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but it'd be interesting to know, because if you know, if you get in a jam, and you're getting $9 million, but they're demanding $13 million worth of services, I know how we can save $4 million.
Yeah, I think we'll have to work with Mr. Riva and Mrs. Pelko to see what all the criteria is and how we're addressing it and equating the dollars to it.
Yeah.
So I think it's something we can do. It's just going to be a collaboration effort. On slide 12, the property tax allocation and stay-at-home harmless reimbursements. The blue portion is the homestead and rollback credits. That's pretty much been consistent throughout the years. It's going to be forecasting a slight decrease in 18 through 21. Again, it's tied to the renewal levy. So with the expiration of the renewal levy, there's going to be a reduction of funding there. And in the red is the TPP reimbursement. As you can see, in 14-15, we were receiving the 3.6 million. Then in 16, it was phased away, 1.4 million. Then the remaining, we received 900,000 this year, and then it'll be gone starting next year.
Thank you, Mr. Kasich.
Yeah.
Other revenues, the biggest chunk that makes this up is our TIF revenues. And again, that's been pretty consistent, $2.1 million that we've been receiving year after year. In 15, there was a little bit of a hike, and it was due to delinquency. And other revenues, last year, 2016, we received 1.6 million. This year, I'm anticipating 1.4 million. The decrease is due to two main things. Is one, for Medicaid reimbursement. They're behind on what the reporting years from what we report to what they've reimbursed us. So they were getting caught up. So there was 2 payments to us in 16. And then in some miscellaneous revenues, we had received more than we were forecasted. Those revenues variable every year, so it's hard to commit to a certain number there. So if we get more again, it'll be a bonus.
Hey, George, on the TIF funding, there's been a considerable amount of development in Strongsville over the last year,
Right.
particularly all the restaurants that have gone in, the redevelopment on Pearl, right, you know, east of the middle school. Have we talked to the city about the TIF funding? Do we expect it to go up any?
A little bit. We've been in the meetings with them. They have to go every year to the council at Cuyahoga County to present, and they're TIFing a lot of the commercial property that's on Pearl and 82. The portion that's TIFed is the change in valuation of what the value was before the value may have increased after their
Before the development?
before the development. So it's just that portion of it. Right now, it's kind of small numbers based on tax. As it increases, I'll increase the forecast, but it's hard to to tie it. It's essentially moving it from the tax bucket to this bucket. So what they're doing is, the county's keeping us whole. So it would have been in we received as property taxes. As the land's TIFing, they're keeping us whole. So rather than giving it to us in the property tax bucket, they break it out and put it in a TIF bucket, and they just give it to us that way. So it's just
Okay.
how we account for it. Total general fund revenues. The red line represents what our revenues are if the levy were to continue. The only decrease would be the TPP funding going away, but other than that, it'd be pretty consistent. The blue line would represent what our revenues would look like if the levy was not extended. So you can see by the black graphic that I have that is the impact of our levy. It's what we have on the ballot is, it means $7.9 million to us, and that's the impact. Will be a considerable decrease if this levy wasn't extended.
Scary slide, but a good one.
Is that?
Yeah.
It's a scary slide, but a good one.
Do we know how many personnel positions that equates to?
No, I haven't done the
No.
math yet.
That's not gonna happen. We're just gonna get it done.
I just want the public to know what the impact could be. You know, we don't want to end up like Parma.
You know.
Their
General,
board president resigned today.
and if you do the math about salary and benefits of an average employee, if it's right around 80 to 100,000, it can mean roughly around 80 to 90 positions. It could,
Okay.
In other words, catastrophic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not,
Just
all-
catastrophic.
it's not all
it's just
positions.
catastrophic. It's not easy.
Right, so it's programs, it's a lot of things.
Right.
Right.
So it's not that.
General fund expenditures, slide 17. Where the money goes. Our total budget for the general fund this year is $72.2 million. Of that, about 80% are made up in salaries and benefits, which equates to about $57.4 million. Then the second biggest chunk is our purchase services, and a good portion of that is tuition to other districts, and also some legal expenses, utilities, transportation costs. The next item, materials and supplies, is 3.3%. Equipment, about 1.4% of our total budget. Other objects is 4.6%. And our community school deductions, about $150,000, which is about 1.2% of the total budget.
This is really good in a way because getting down to 80% of the budget in a service industry like we are, that's right where it should be.
Right.
Where was it before, Richard?
92?
92, 93%.
Thank you to help
Yeah.
with all of our employees helping us with this. Wow.
Salaries, on the next slide, and then, again, same format. The graph is on one slide, and the reconciliation of the changes is on the following slide. Last year, our salary, we spent about $39 million in salaries. This year, I'm anticipating an increase of about $1.5 million, and the difference is really a net of $400,000 savings and position reductions versus increases for COLA adjustments, step increases. And then we also had about $500,000 of budget that wasn't spent due to savings in supplementals, overtime, and a few other areas were just kind of added up. So hopefully we see that type of savings again this year as well. But it's just bringing the budget back to where it was for those items. And then each year, there's also, it increases based on the same criteria. It's netted against the position reductions that I talked about versus the negotiated increases. Benefits, slide 21. In 2016, we spent $16.2 million. On 17, I'm anticipating $16.9 million. Primary reason is just the net increase against savings from position reductions of $100,000 versus the 10% projected healthcare increase. Hopefully it comes in less in 17, since our premiums are based on a calendar year. So for fiscal year 16, it's really half of that. It's just from January to June. So it's really 5% in 17 and then 10% in the years thereafter. And then in the other, there's a slight increase, and it's due to workers' comp. We were paying workers' comp in arrear. They changed their format patterns where they want to be caught up and paid in the current year. So we have an additional payment this year to be made whole, I guess, and their rate is also anticipated to increase as well.
How does your assumption match reality on the benefits? I mean, I know you don't know in the future, but historically, I mean, what have we seen in the last couple of years?
So last year was my first one, and last year we did see some savings. Again, I had a 10% healthcare increase, and it came at 3%.
Okay,
So
3%'s awfully low, though. I mean, that's,
yeah, and we're meeting next, and again, this year I have 10%, and we're meeting next month. We're meeting this month, we'll probably get the underwriter's report from next month to set our premiums for next year. So I'm hoping too it's right around the same
I
as
think
well.
I think our company was right around 7% or somewhere around there, 7.5. So, okay,
But we've had a couple good years in a row where it hasn't really gone up quite a bit. So it's always waiting for that shoe to drop. When is
yeah.
it gonna happen? So
Yeah, we-
hopefully it's we continue the good trend.
Right.
Purchase services. Last year, we spent $6.6 million. Next year, I'm forecasting $8 million in total. Again, the primary areas here are In blue is our utilities. Projecting a slight increase from 1.6 million to 1.8 million to $200,000. There, it's, electricity's kind of going up. I know we took a couple buildings offline, but until we get a full year of, with the new building, how that's going to be, and also the rate has gone up for electricity and water and sewer. They've increased their costs based on the stormwater fees. So we're able to get a little bit of a credit there, but we haven't gotten that first bill to see what that increase is yet as well. So hopefully it comes in better. And last year we had a good year for gas. It was a mild winter, so there was a little bit of savings there.
George?
Yeah.
I'm really surprised by that number, just because of the reduction in the buildings. I mean, we've taken 4 buildings offline. I'm really surprised that, if nothing else, with your increases, we haven't even offset, if not saved some more. So that's the number I'll be looking at. 'Cause to go up $200,000 when we've removed an all-electric building, 2 middle schools and condensed into 1 that actually has some insulation in it, I'll be surprised. I'll be more interested to see what that number's gonna be like.
Yeah, and again, it is a forecast.
Sure.
Without the actual year of the bills, it's hard to
Right.
estimate what that decrease is gonna be.
Oh,
So hopefully that we do come in less.
I'd rather play it safe than sorry, don't
Right.
get me wrong. I'm just saying that that's the one number that I'm
Right.
curious to see.
So, and
George?
again, it's being offset, but I don't know what those water bills are gonna be yet with that.
Yeah, everybody's been hit with big water
Right.
bills.
Have we had any conversations with the sewer district? You know, there's in the news, there's the talk at a homeowner level about rain buckets and things like that. I mean, it would behoove us to at least make the phone call and say, with as much parking lot impervious space as we have, is there something we can do to address that?
Right, and myself and Mr. Donnelly did have a discussion with the sewer department. So there's 3 items that they look at for credits, and we're currently on 1. The first one is the education credit. They have a curriculum for stormwater and runoff. They prepared a little booklet to be offered for, I think, grades 3, 9th, and 10th, was it? I can't remember offhand, but I was working with Mrs. Green on it. Anyways, if we implement them in the buildings that have the charges, which we have, or we requested to, we're still waiting for the materials. It's a 4-hour curriculum. Once the schools do that, we show that we've done it, send it back to the sewer district. There's a 25% credit to our charges for those buildings, and they look at each building individually. And then there's also 2 other credits for impervious space. One, if you have a retention pond, which we do at the middle school. So when that's officially done, I believe Mr. Donnelly's going to have a discussion with that department to get that building in line for a credit there. And then also it's other improvements, such as, I think one of them is like, if you put grass on your roof and different items. So Mr. Donnelly's aware of them, and we've kind of had a discussion.
No grass on the roof,
No grass on the roof.
no goats, no.
So So there are other credits, there's some sorts of stuff like that. And they look at it per building and not at the entire district level.
Thank you.
And for those curriculums, we are implementing in the elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school. So. Purchase services, continuing. So the red is the tuition to other districts. 2016, we spent 2.6 million. Next year, I'm anticipating 3.3. The biggest chunk there is the College Credit Plus. That has gone up. Right now, we pay 3 semesters worth, fall, spring, and summer. And it's in arrears. So what the state wants to do is, again, they want to do a catch-up and not pay it in arrears, pay it in the year that it actually takes place. So next year, they're essentially not making it, they just deduct it from the foundation payment, they're deducting 4 semesters worth. So that's why there's an increase there. And also, we're seeing an increase in kids taking College Credit Plus. Working with the assistant principal, Brian Tamino, anticipating there's going to be a 24% increase this year, along with another about 20% on top of that for next year. So more kids are participating, so that's why the costs are going up. Also, there's built-in increases every year for when we outplace special ed students to different service providers. That cost's been going up every year as more kids have been being outplaced, so we see costs in there. So just anticipating for that. Again, this is another area where I'm a little bit conservative. These numbers fluctuate during the course of the year, and it's also based on relying on other districts submitting data to ODE, so a lot of the final numbers aren't hit till the end of the year and then validated. So this one, I'm more likely to be inclined to be conservative than aggressive because I don't want to be caught at the end of the year with not enough budget versus enough.
How much do we spend on the college credit?
Last year we spent 272. This year with the increase, about 570. So again, it's an estimate based on projecting the number of kids that take advantage of it and what school they go to. We have agreements with the different colleges. Materials and supplies. Last year we spent 1.7 million. This year I'm anticipating 2.4 million. The main reason for the increase is essentially we have $200,000 of purchase orders that were carried into this fiscal year, and then $500,000 of just budget not being spent last year. So hopefully here, our departments and our schools have been doing a good job of not spending money if they don't need to. So it's just putting their budget back to where it was in those areas, and hopefully that's that trend continues. And then also fuel, we had a good year in fuel. As you can see in 14-15, we spent 400. It's the green part of the bar. 14 we spent 400,000. 15 we spent 300,000. Last school year we spent 200,000. So as long as fuel prices stay where they are, we might see a savings there again too. So it's one of those that hard to predict. Rather be a little conservative than under budgeting. Equipment, overall budgeting $1 million. 400,000 was spent last year. We increased the technology equipment by 500,000. They used to have 200,000, so now 700. We're being able to implement the one-to-one technology and infrastructure upgrades. And then the other 300,000 is majority of it's in the business service department. Then other departments allocate a little bit for capital as well, such computers and other needs.
What's the other 200,000 for?
What's that?
So I understand the $500,000 for the one-to-one program
Right.
for the freshmen coming in. I understand that. But we had a $200,000 budget prior to. What are we spending the $200,000 on
In technology?
in technology?
This year they used it, or the year that just passed, they used it for upgrading the projectors at the buildings. That was where the majority of the chunk went.
And that's a lot of our infrastructure issues too, servers, switches, wiring, things of that. It's the back end stuff. The $500,000 is more for what the kids are using.
And the one-to-one, though, a good portion of that, right, is paid by the students, quite, in their fees, correct? There's the technology fee and that we implemented pays for a good chunk of the one-to-one, right?
I wouldn't say a good chunk. It's
Oh, no? Okay.
About
It's a
100,000.
smaller chunk.
It's a small chunk.
Overall,
If we're
it's
talking
also-
chunks, this is a little
It's a
chunk,
small
right?
chunk.
Yeah, overall, it's probably gonna be about 100,000 of
Okay.
all the tech fees from all the grades.
Oh, okay, all right.
The other thing to remember is the Chromebook, there's a $50 a year fee. We had to the district fronted the cost of the purchasing for the first year. So if you figure $50 freshman through senior, that's $200, but the Chromebook itself is costing approximately $300, $350 with services, and that's being paid in advance by the district. By the time the individual student finishes high school, they'll have provided 200 of that, but we needed to make the purchase
Okay.
up front.
That's awfully expensive for a dumb terminal.
Talk to
Why
Richard
would
like that.
$350 for a Chromebook?
I'm suggesting
Yeah.
it's 300, and then you have all the other, you have the carts,
Carts.
you have the charging, you have all of that kind of stuff. And we've been through it, to Vicky's credit, the Chromebooks themselves, we've been getting great prices between
Yeah.
$200 and $250 each.
That's
Yeah.
was more reasonable.
With the ancillary costs, all the other stuff.
Right,
added
and
to
a
it.
lot of those kinds of costs are startup
There's
costs.
sunk costs, yeah.
Correct.
Because I remember Vicky and Richard and you guys all got involved and really got us a great price on the Chromebooks.
Okay, thank you.
And the last item
The same question.
of the expenses is our other objects, transfers and advances. The blue portion represents any general fund debt that we have. We had one small debt issue come off, so we saw a decrease from 600,000 to 500,000. The red is other objects. See a slight increase there. There's, as I believe Mr. Rybo mentioned in the past, the biggest increase there is going to be the election expenses for the renewal levy. Because when you're on the ballot, there's election expenses that the county deducts from you. So just anticipating for those this year. And then also the other charges that are in there are county auditor fees, audit fees, bank services. But the majority of the chunk is county auditor fees that make up the other objects. And then the transfer and advances. Last year, the transfer and advances were 1.1 million. This year, bringing it up to 1.2, and it's broken out 120,000 going to school supplies, 1 million for retirement, the severance account that we have, which is essentially just putting another fund to account for it separately, and then 35,000 for turf savings, and then 24,000 going into the, along with the 35 going to the Excellence Athletic Fund for the Southwest savings. So that makes up the transfers. And then that concludes the expenses, so just to wrap up in summary. The next two slides are the same slides I had in my presentation last month for the budget presentation, but thought it'd be good to present again since one of our goals is financial prudence, and just to reiterate our cost-saving measures in the past, present, and future. As we know, we've taken 6 buildings offline and repurposed one, closed Allen, demolished it in 2013, repurposed Zellers in 16, and then this past year we had Drake, Albion Center, the OPS building, the board office, we all closed, demolished or sold. During fiscal year 14, we switched to a fully insured healthcare plan. Since the switch, we've saved about $2.8 million through last fiscal year by being self-funded versus fully insured. The next slide, Mr. Nasos, you mentioned earlier about the percentage of enrollment decline versus position decline. So since 2009, we have 212 less positions in the district compared to this fiscal year, which is a 23% decline. And then based on how enrollment is, we'll continue. If we need to reduce positions, it's built in the forecast for 18, reducing 5 positions, 19, 9 positions. Last year we reduced 24, and this year we reduced 26. And then just other cost-saving efforts. We were able to implement the Ohio Online Learning Program, which is now the Strongsville Academy, which is saving us about $200,000 annually by retaining the students in our district rather than going to a charter school, such as ECOT. So to wrap up, to summarize the general fund where we stand cash-wise. So in yellow is the current fiscal year. The column on the right of it is fiscal year 16, the year that just passed. We finished that year with unencumbered cash balance of $17.4 million. $1 million of that was encumbrances, so an ending cash balance of $18.4 million, which carried over into fiscal year 17. Anticipating total revenues to be $71.5 million, expenses $72.2. Revenue over cash, based on the forecast, will be eating into a little bit of our cash balance, but as I mentioned, I was a little conservative in some areas, so hopefully we'll do realize savings there that that number will be vice versa, and then ending the year with an unencumbered cash balance of 16.6. So if you look at the horizontal column going across the yellow, so that's the figure without the renewal levy being extended. As you can see, what our impact is, that it's going to, as someone mentioned earlier, it's going to be catastrophic. As you can see, in 19, we'd have a deficit of $6.3 million if the levy wasn't extended. Then 2020, a $22.2 million deficit, and then 21, a $40 million deficit. And then you look below that, the line below that, the state allows us to make an assumption if the renewal passed, what our forecast would be and submit it that way. But as you can see that in 2019, that $6.3 million deficit would be a $5.4 million surplus. That $22.2 million deficit in 20 would be a $2.7 million deficit, which would be manageable. And then in 2021, it'd be a $13.6 million deficit versus the 40.9. So as you can see, what the impact of issue 120 is for us.
I ask the question all the time, but again, what year did we ask, what was the last year we asked Strongsville taxpayers for an increase for the school district?
2007.
Just, I think everybody should take a moment and think about that. What other district in our region from 2007 to potentially 2020? That's massive. That's a great job.
Although I would reach out and challenge, Cameron and George. We've got that 2.7 deficit. We got 4 years, essentially 4 years of activity, right?
Right.
$700,000 a year for the next 4 years. I think we gotta start thinking about what can we do? I mean, you always gotta get that 1 year out, right? And
Right.
when you get into 2021, who knows, where we'll be? But I think we have to start thinking now about how do we get that to zero?
Right.
And maybe just with, the way the budget shakes out and the way the spending comes out or whatever. Now I'm talking about cutting programs or doing things. I'm just saying, where can we find that money? Where can we, whether it's, the way, in our benefit costs, not reducing our benefits. I'm just saying managing our benefits through wellness programs or whatever it is, whether it's fuel, whether it's, whatever, right? So I think that should be a goal for us that we start thinking about. How do we whittle that thing down so that when we get to 2020, how do we get there, and make that black, like break even or whatever. I mean, the problem is you're spending more than you're taking in, that middle line that's up there, but, at least, pushing that thing out. We've been working at that pretty hard and doing a good job every year, pushing that thing out, pushing it out. So it'd be nice if we could get that thing to in the black somehow.
Yeah, we're kind of already ahead of you. We've already had kind of discussions, kind of moving forward.
You guys always are, so, I mean,
On what to do, and also just kind of, as part of our 2020 plan, there was some criteria in there about cash reserve. So my next step is defining metrics on what should be our cash reserve and how much do we eat into it and when do we stop eating into it and what do we want to carry, and then start making these adjustments and continue to look for efficiencies.
do you, never mind, we're good. So that's,
And one of the things, if George would put up the same slide from his presentation at this time last year, 2019 would have been about a negative $3 million deficit.
right.
So, through the work that George is doing and we're doing as all of us up here and this staff of the district, we're able to every year extend that one more year.
Right.
And so we do feel, even though it's a $2.7 million deficit, that we're trending in the right direction to eliminate that, to extend it one more year.
Can I challenge you, George, the next time we see this, I'd like to see what was our 5-year forecast last year? I'd like to see not so much the accuracy of the document, but I think it's really important that people understand that you guys come in every single day, and we come in, once every 2 weeks, and that's what we're thinking about. We're talking about increasing the programs for our children, but how do we do it at a better cost, manage our money better?
Right.
There's a massive fundamental difference between us, I believe, this district and so many other districts.
Right.
And I think people need to see that and be reminded of that.
Right.
So if you could add just a summary, this year's 5-year forecast versus last year's 5-year forecast.
Right.
If you maybe go back one more year and we can look at those differences and changes, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
I know when I came on the board in 2011, 2012 was red, and it was big red, you know what I mean? So, and I'm not, some of it was the way we did forecasting back then, but a lot of it has been effort, and I mean, at one point, we took out $8 million in one board meeting, and we've been working to get it back ever since. I mean, it's just, we've been pushing that thing out and doing a good job of it, and trying to do,
But I don't think people know that. People don't come to these meetings and they don't pay attention to that. I think it's important they understand that,
Lay it
see it,
out.
yeah.
And these forecasts too, they're kind of a moving target in a sense where you're trying to predict now for what's gonna happen the entire year. A lot of things change, find out something tomorrow, which is swinging out of whack, but my goal is just to always try and be as on point at the end of the year. And I kind of do look at,
We don't have
How we-
big,
how
we
we
don't have
did-
big percentage swings year to year, you know what I mean?
Right.
As far as our budget, we've got pretty good budget,
Right.
you know, 1 year, 2 year out accuracy, so
So-
I'm comfortable with that, that it's effort, not
Yeah.
just budgeting, you know.
I mean, we haven't lost 30 million someplace in the budget.
we've not. Thank God.
Thank God, that's right.
just wrapping up, this next slide just looks at it if the renewal was in the revenue portion. We already talked about that. So this is just looking at our cash balance. This is a slide that I had in last year's forecast, and it's essentially showing if the TPP was never reduced, where our cash balance would be. And that's the red. The red shows where our cash balance would be if TPP was never reduced, if we continue to receive that 3.6 million year after year, versus the blue is what our cash balance looks like based on the current forecast. So as you could see, we would have been pretty much whole with about a $3 million deficit in the last fiscal year versus the 13 million. So,
Hey, George, just to clarify one thing, though. The TPP, like you said, will we receive? Those are our tax dollars that go to Columbus, that they decide then what proportion will be returned to us, and they spend the rest of it on whatever programs they want to spend it on. So, I mean, if they just left the tax dollars right here, we'd be fine.
yeah.
It's
I
not
think it wa-
levied,
I think it was tax dollars that were in place in the 90s that were taken away, and taken away from the businesses in order to keep schools harmless. They were putting it back as a reimbursement to the schools. Now with Keisha's biennium budget, he was trying to reduce any type of reimbursements that the state was doing, and that was something that was eliminated.
well, the TPP, I mean, the tangible personal property tax was the old method of taxation prior to the CAT tax, which is what we use now, which is a commercial activity tax, which is essentially a revenue-driven tax as opposed to a property-driven tax. And it was a good idea, and they both generate the same amount of money, but for some reason, the state said, okay, even though we're gonna do it, we're no longer gonna give you the tangible personal property tax, but we're gonna continue to tax on the activity tax and just not give it to the schools. So, I mean, it's a bit of a shell game. They're still taxing, and they're still taxing at a very similar rate, in my opinion. I've been told by a few politicians that, no, it's not the same, but when you look at the numbers, it's pretty close to the same. So it's, you know, in that case, it's just,
And then just to kind of
You
wrap
would
it up,
know.
same slide that I had the last presentation of the budget, but this, instead of looking at 1 year, this is just looking at the life of the forecast. And a kind of waterfall slide that I've been having in the 5-year forecast and the budget presentations. There's various factors that increase the budget, and then as we talked about, what we do, the cuts that we've made to offset it. So the column on the left shows the factors that increase the budget. So in 2014, we had our expenses were 68.5 million. Through 2014 through 2021, our salary increases are anticipated to increase by $8 million. Our health care by $9 million. Tuition by $1 million, and then other increase of $2 million. So if we would have done nothing, our forecast expenditures in 2021, at the end of this forecast, would have been $88 million. Cumulatively, we've been able to reduce $9 million off that by closing the schools that we've done, being able to reduce positions, keeping up with the enrollment decline, switching over to self-insurance, we saved $2.8 million. We've had other adjustments that added up to about $2.8 million to bring that figure down to 79.5. So it's a constant battle of there's factors that increase versus we got to find ways to continue to be efficient.
so the right side of the chart is financial prudence,
Right.
right? $9 million, to the tune of $9 million. Nice work.
And then just to wrap it up, just our renewal levy timeline, I think we're all aware of it, is that 2012 was the last time it was renewed for $6 million for 5 years. The tax year began in 2012, ends in this current tax year. Collections are always a year behind. Collections start in 13 or ending in 17. The districts have until the end of the collection year to renew the levy. The earliest we could have been on the ballot is this November. which is issue 120. And then we also have two possible more times in 17, in May or November, possibly August. But it is going to be more cost to the district by having it in 17, as the cost is split off by the items that are on the ballot. So, and that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions?
No, nice job. I think you explained very well. It's good presentation.
We said it before, George, you're a treasure.
Thanks.
Ready?
Right?
Well, under superintendent's report, we have a couple items tonight under discussion. You know, one of the things, as you talk about, Mr. Naso, every board meeting, are our three goals. And our three goals are built into our Strong Schools 2020 plan and some of the actions we're taking to ensure that we're a premier district for our students and community by 2020. I want to highlight kind of one of the objectives and action steps each meeting and what we're working on. And one of the ones I want to highlight today kind of goes along with Aaron's presentation here in a minute, is about providing systemic professional development for our staff. You know, when I used to be a fourth grade teacher, I had a direct impact on the success of the students I taught. What I did as a teacher resulted in success and achievement, success and growth, or the opposite. But as adults and as administrators in the district, what we talk about with our administrative team, with the various plans that we have, we no longer have that direct contact with students. Our focus is not about how we get our students to learn and grow. Our focus as an administrative team is how do we help support our teachers and staff and adults to learn and grow. Therefore, they help our students learn and grow and find success and achievement and growth in the classroom. So that's what we talk about. We talk about what are we going to do as an administrative team to help our teachers learn, to help our teachers grow, and how can we influence what actions are taking place in the classroom, which in turn influence our students. So one of those is continuously providing professional development and growth, whether it's for our teachers, our support staff, or administrative team. So kind of we talk about in this first column here, what are we targeting? We're targeting expanding professional learning opportunities that align with district goals and meet individual learning needs. So what Aaron and Andy and Vicki and Jenny have all sat down and looked at is said, you know, what in our instructional plan, what are we targeting? And Erin will speak more to that in her presentation coming up. But how we ask our teachers to differentiate, or a fancy term for how do you make sure instruction is meaningful to each student based on where they are at in your classroom, we feel the same onus as adults. How do we make sure what one teacher needs or one staff member needs may be a little different from the next, and how do we individualize that for them? So one of the action steps, or what we say is how do we get there, is generating an electronic professional development guide available of after-school offerings, and we're measuring that by the completion of that guide, participation in those sessions, and also evaluation of the PD. And the part that we're focusing on this year is implementation. How do we ensure the efforts that we're putting forth in developing learning actually translate into actions and work in the classroom with students? So what I shared with the board in a handout is a summary of all the work. Now this is just curriculum. Andy has his, he's finishing up. Vicki's got hers, that is in there. But every teacher in the district is going to get this handout, which gives a summary of all the PD that you can have. The nice thing, technology is great, is as you can see on the back, you don't have to find the packet. You simply snap a QR code, you can see what's going on. You can snap another QR code and you could register to attend that event or that PD. And I would like to acknowledge Aaron, because as you look at this, Aaron is running every one of these sessions. So this is a tremendous undertaking that she's put on as a part of the department. She's planning them, she's developing them. Some of them are for Ashland credit, some of them are just for growth and development. And just because I think it's cool, I wanted to show you, you know, if you click on that QR code, what she's developed is a flip book where teachers can, I like the swish sound, I made her put it in there, but again, the QR code there, the links there, again, we can see the summaries that are there, but then teachers can go in and see actually, okay, what date is this, what time, what is the description of the session, and what does it mean to me in my professional growth. So this has been something that we've talked about for a couple years in the district of getting to this type of professional development, not just on the 2.5 days we have as a district to do it, but ongoing. And I'm proud of the work Erin and her department has done, and Andy is doing with his department and Vicki with hers to continue the professional learning for our staff. You know, it's kind of a catchphrase in education that we're lifelong learners. But the reality is we'll never be as good as we can be if we don't truly embrace that and look at how we can grow our practice each and every day. So this kind of gives the board a snapshot. Our teachers have received that as a snapshot. Jenny's working with our support staff 2 or 3 times a year on different professional development opportunities for all of our members as well. So I just wanted to share with you how Erin has worked to fulfill this action step on our 2020 plan.
I think it's great. But do we have an expectation of how much PD a particular staff member will complete in a year?
We have, in terms, this is voluntary PD. So, you know, that's one of the things that Erin's, we have required PD throughout the year. So there's 2.5 days that we have that's required. All of our teachers are required to do 6 hours beyond the school day of professional development every year. This is an enhancement to that. So what we've seen in the last year, Erin does a lot of work over the summertime. We've seen more teachers participating in the summer sessions than we've seen in recent years. And what we're going to see through this, and this is a part of the feedback and survey, first of all, what is of interest? You know, Erin, to generate this, she did a survey of all the teachers. You know, it wasn't just Erin's guesses, here's what I think they want to know. She sent out a survey and said, what do you want to know? What do you need help and support? And what you see here are the ideas that came back most prevalent in that survey. Then the next step is to see who actually shows up and how often they show up and what kind of impact, and do we need to focus it a little more. As you can see, one of our big areas is reading, and especially in the elementary, you'll see reading throughout to develop those skills and to build upon the PD that they've gotten through those required days earlier.
Along those same lines, is there a component that the staff can rate how effective they thought the lesson was, if it's worthwhile, and then it could spread to other people wanting to take it, so?
Yeah.
Or maybe this didn't really capture what I thought it was going to capture, or, okay, good,
Yeah, so part of that 2020 evaluation is, as Erin said, it's the feedback piece.
okay.
You know, are we hitting the mark with really what you wanted to know and what you wanted to learn? And if not, next time we go through this, we'll revamp it or we'll scrap it if it's not really hitting the needs of our staff.
Great.
Can I just make the request that we revisit this, and I'd like to see the numbers. I mean, it's voluntary, so in 6 months, it'd be nice to see
Sure.
how many teachers are taking advantage of the classes, et cetera. This is the initial year. The real measurement is going to come in years 2 and 3, when we'll be able to correlate this with the report cards, and we anticipate the improvement. We need to find out if the improvement's there, but, you know, ultimately it's voluntary, and that's great. At some point, we may have to say, if voluntary isn't getting the job done, just like with our students, some students are aware of their deficits and know what they need, some are not. And over time, we'll be able to be a little more focused on finding nice ways to suggest that certain teachers would benefit from this class. And I'm certain anybody would want to do that.
And one of the things that I think is an enhancement to our building principles as well is all of our teachers in some fashion go through the OTES process every year. Whether it's a full formal evaluation or whether it's an off-year meeting and review. But this is a great resource for our teachers to say, hey, I notice here's an area that I think, you know, can use some additional attention. And now, in November, here's a PD that you can go to enhance your skills. So, you know, that's another resource we have.
I was just gonna say, another thing that, Aaron, as I was sitting here thinking that we'll probably want to remind our teachers of, we added in here a local professional development committee session. I think it's important, as I sign papers of classes and courses our teachers want to take that may not directly correlate exactly to what some of these things that are probably more pressing that they need. They can take these courses to advance their license. So every, 5 years, they need to re-up that, and they can collect these hours to do that. So in that October meeting, that'll be something that I discuss. I think some of them aren't aware that they can do that, and they end up paying, for courses when maybe they don't need to. They can use these, so.
The other thing, if we're gonna report on participation, we should report on the ratings of the courses.
Sure.
Because it wouldn't be appropriate to say, well, nobody's attending, and then we look and see the ratings, and the ratings are terrible, right? And it's like, these courses stink, so that's why nobody's taking them. It's not that they don't wanna do them, they're just not good. And I don't think that's gonna be the case,
Right.
but it'd be good to see both, right? So,
Right. Sure.
and I think I know the courses are gonna be good, and as long as we get that information out there that they're good courses, because there's a lot of times, I know at work, I'm required to take these,
Right.
continuing education things, and they're awful. And you just gotta get through them, but they're mandatory, so you
Right.
gotta get through them. And, but, so I'm sure that's not the case here, but it wouldn't be fair to report the participation if we didn't get the ratings of the courses
Correct.
themselves.
No, the majority of these will be done, March time, so we'll be able to give that feedback as to where we're at in both cases.
I'd be very curious to see the OTES ratings of the teachers who take the most of these courses, the correlation between those who take the initiative to improve their teaching skills and those who don't.
I'll give you a guess.
Well, maybe, and what about on the other side of the coin? What about for the administration? What about continuing education for principals on communication
For the super.
and customer service and those kinds of things? Maybe we need to start incorporating in superintendents being nice to their board members,
Well, I mean, he has to
you
come
know.
sit through this twice a month.
I know, it's
We
pretty
should give
rough.
him
It
credit
is
for
pretty
our
rough.
meetings.
But I mean, that might be something we might want to consider, right? Because, this would be the way to get out some of these customer service initiatives where
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we're doing all the right thing in communication and.
And we've really transitioned, it's different for our administrative team. We meet twice a month with our administrators, and we've transitioned those meetings to professional development meetings. So, we believe, Jenny created last year kind of a weekly informational blurb to them of, we don't feel we should take that time that we have together to talk about things that we could put in a little posting. We send that out every Friday to them. So we meet once a month with our entire administrative team, and it's all professional development based. And then the second time we meet in specific groups. So we have all of our elementary principals together, and it's a curriculum focused meeting, and also our secondary administrators together. So it definitely is important that we are able to hit all of our employees, not just one group, with the development that they need.
And just a comment as a dad, William's been in the district for 6 years. The communication from the principals to the parents we're pushing the needle so much further than in this district's ever seen. This is something that this was a dream 4 or 5 years ago. So the communications between the principals, the accountability and the communication from the teachers, and these offerings, we're pushing the needle so far beyond that this district's ever seen. It's just, we talked about making decisions on data, and I guess that's what we're asking for, so.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the feedback, and we'll come back in a few months and have that information for you. And this kind of transitions to where we've been and where we're going and the work that we did this summer. So I've asked Aaron to present to you not only on the district report cards specifically, but the impact that's had on the work and the focus for the 16-17 school year. So I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Great, thank you. Good evening. As Mr. Ryba just said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the report card tonight and then spend the majority of the time talking about what we're doing about those scores. How are we moving the district forward? So this is a snapshot here. This is our district report card that was released mid-September, and it's an overview of last year, school year 15-16. I know we've referenced some controversy we've heard over the report card and the validity of it. Bottom line is, it is a data point for us. We are accountable to our taxpayers, to the community, so it is something that we've analyzed thoroughly and will continue to do so. For the first time, we have composite grades in 6 areas. So in an expedited fashion, I'm going to go through those 6 areas, and please, if you have further questions, let me know. As you know, I've done this a few times, so I think you're somewhat familiar with this now, but let me know if that's not the case, you have any questions. First, overall, we have achievement grade. The component grade was a C, and that's made up of the indicators and the performance index. I've listed out for you the actual scores as well as the percentages. Just as a reference point, in the state of Ohio, out of 608 districts, there were 8 A's. So that kind of gives us a feel for, where we are and where we rank. Again, we're accountable, we own this, but it also helps us to know where other districts were. Performance index, ours was a C. There were 2 A's in the state of Ohio. This one, kind of a stark slide here, our gap closing, it's the same as our AMO, or our annual measurable objectives. And this one's important because it talks about all of our subgroups. And all students are important, and that's why they're in there included as well. But then it breaks down the other 8 subgroups that we have in our district. So this compares these students, how they're performing from last year. Did they either hit the target or did they perform better than the group last year in these subgroups? Again, in the state, there were 2 A's overall. Last year, we had a B, so we do have work to do. There were 120 schools last year that had A's that moved to F's this year, 120 districts. So again, just some kind of background information
be?
as to,
It seems ridiculous, doesn't it?
It is
I mean, I know we
absolutely
own it, I know
ridiculous.
it's ours.
Right.
But we go from an A on closing the gap in growth to an F. Now, I get when you change the rules and you change the standards. It just doesn't even make sense. I mean, we're not doing anything different. So, I mean, I accept it. We're gonna
Sure.
work at it. I wanna see
Right.
your plans, how you're gonna attack this, because obviously it's a different measure, different something.
But
So,
the reality is 120 districts went from an A to an F. So is it a valid measure? I mean, 120.
but it's the new line in the sand, so we're gonna
Exactly,
attack it,
right.
right?
Okay.
and we may not
I'd be
like it, we
interested-
may not agree with it, but, it
No.
is our data point that we're using.
I have a question, Erin.
Sure.
When it says all students up
Yes.
there, now is that the total population that's included in this?
Yes, in our district, that, for some reason, they make that a
So-
subgroup. And so we look at that comparison. So how did all students do in, for example, English language arts? Did they make a gain overall, or did they?
So are they comparing these other subgroups to the all students group? Where do they get
Yes
their
and no.
grade? Huh?
There's a set target for the state. So students with disabilities, it has a set percentage that our students need to have passage. For example, 74.9%. Are our students with disabilities passing at that rate? If so, we get the credit for it. If not, we get 0 points.
Did our all students subgroup, do you know what did they pass? Did they have like a B or an A, and then what brought us down was all these other subgroups?
We actually overall lost points. So we were negative 17 from where we were last year in English language arts, like a minus 9, I think, for math. So we compare, it's both, there's a set target by the state that we have to hit for all of these, and it's all a point configuration. So if we don't make the mark on any or all of those, we get the 0 points, and they divide it by the possible. So it's all of these. I don't think we've hit many points, to be honest.
I'm excited for next year.
If they don't move the goalposts again.
Yeah.
Well, it is going up again. Next one, we have our progress or our value added. This one talks about the growth. So this is actual student to student, year to year. And this year, they measured it only in 1-year growth. Because of the changes in testing, typically it's a 3-year growth. It's 1 year this year. Overall, we had a component grade of a B. You do notice the C is in the students in the lowest 20%, and then D, again, is students with disabilities. So it's something that we need to definitely take a look at. We need to see where we're not meeting the needs or what we can do to strengthen those subgroups, as well as overall with our students. Graduation rate, this one we're very proud of. The high school continues to work diligently toward A's in both of these areas. The one is a 4-year graduation rate, and the other is a 5-year graduation rate. You know, from the surface, it may not seem terribly challenging to get kids to graduate in 4 or 5 years, but when you start looking at, they have to have 21 credits, and they have to have designated number of credits in certain subjects, so 4 credits of math. One of them has to be in Algebra 2. You have to pass all 5 sections of the OGT. You have to keep them in school, keep them engaged. It is tough. And so this is something that, you know, we as a district are very proud of. We did improve from last year. We had an A and a B last year. So this year, 2 A's on that one. And K-3 literacy, a C for this, that's the same as we had last year, remembering that a C equals a year's worth of growth. So we're giving the kids a year's worth of growth in a year's worth of time. We would like to see that higher, of course. 4 districts in the state, had an A in this. And there were 240 Fs in the state. So this is tracking the kids from K to 3rd grade. Are they proficient by 3rd grade? And our last composite measure here is our prepared for success. This one, as a composite, we had a C. This is a new measure for us. It wasn't graded last year. It looks at how well we're preparing our students as they leave high school. And so it looks at how many kids are taking ACTs and how many are scoring remediation-free SATs. Are they ready for career or technical fields? Something to note about this is it's a few years behind, so it lags. This is when the class of 2015 entered in 2011, kind of the experiences they've had throughout those 4 years. So we've added and enhanced a lot in our curriculum, in our just overall capacity, and what we're preparing students for in the last 5 years. I do want to point out that last year, we're proud to say, last year's class, 2016, we had 93% of our kids going to either a 2 or 4-year college. So I expect this to bump up in the upcoming years as well. One thing to note is that it takes the entire class as the denominator. So it's not just how many students took the ACT and were remediation-free, it's how many students took the ACT remediation-free out of the entire class.
Do they count a student who retakes an ACT or SAT as remediated? Do kids take it to improve their scores?
Correct. They take the higher score, I believe.
Well, the SAT and ACT do, but I'm saying,
Correct.
how do they count this?
It's all coded in our EMA system, so I would like
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I
That's
have a
okay.
lot of heartburn with the
I understand.
characters in Columbus.
In this one, there were 13 A's in the state for this measure.
I would be curious, this doesn't seem to have as a tangible goalpost, or I'm having a difficult time understanding how you quantify, a student being prepared for success after a high school. If at all possible, can you send me something that lets me try to understand exactly what they used to give us
Sure.
a C?
Sure. I have
I-
a slide that I could show you too, but
Just send it to me in email.
Absolutely.
This does not seem
it looks at
like
ACT, SAT, do you have a career or a technical field, kind of as you leave high school? I know it's hard to project. Are you going to be successful after high school? Right.
That's my point.
Right.
That's my point. If you want to
Understood.
measure us, then give us, here's some tangible markers to look at. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
2 points. First of all, can you remind me again, did we take our tests on the computer, or was this paper and pencil this
This
year?
was all paper, pencil last
Okay.
year, with the exception of 4th grade social studies and 5th grade, 4th grade social studies, 5th grade science, yeah.
And did we see any differences in results based on that?
We did not, but again, the
That's good.
tests changed from year
Right.
to year. This year, we're going to all online. We don't have the option to not do that. So in the spring, every test, grades 3 through high school, will be online.
Okay.
So-
And then, second of all, it appears to me that the state is saying anybody that got a C is just average. It's kind of like the old, when we were in high school, okay, C is the average
Correct.
student.
Right.
So C is now the average school. Is that pretty much?
The intent is to make the parameters more stringent so that districts are truly the premier. You know, we don't have a plethora of A's in the state. You know, it is more of that bell curve, so,
Oh,
yes.
so they're grading on a curve. Okay,
Well,
we don't
not-
got to get into
not
that discussion. We hate the
necessarily,
grading on a
but-
curve thing.
But it
start
is,
to-
that's the exact, if you
Okay.
get a C, you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Okay. But that's not acceptable for us.
Correct.
Given the number of A's, Jane, it doesn't sound like there's 2 standard deviations.
I know, you're right, it doesn't. They need to go back to remedial.
But we're not looking for average, right?
We
This is
are
an
not.
average district,
That's
there's
right.
nothing
Looking
in
for
our,
premier. And
nothing
so
in our
that leads
mantra
us.
that says we're gonna be average.
Exactly
Ever.
to, again, what are we doing with this data? What can we do with the data? What do we have control over? What is true trend data versus just kind of an anomaly in the year? So we had a very systematic process that we used, and this started back in July. In July, we had the majority of the data already. There was only one measure we didn't have. So central office, which is, for the most part, the directors, central office leadership team, we sat and analyzed the data, and we went pretty deep with it with test scores. We looked at individual buildings, we looked at kids, we looked at subgroups, we looked at grade levels. Broke it down in as many ways as we could to kind of get to these root causes. Where are we struggling? Where are we having success? Is this a trend that we've seen for a few years, or is this maybe just a sub-factor of something else going on? So once we came up with those kind of themes, which I'll address in just a second, we started talking about what are we going to do with it? How are we going to look at addressing these for the 16-17 school year? Because we know we can't wait. We can't just hope the test gets easier, hope our kids start to, learn the test a bit. We need to address it in a rigorous way. So the next step is in August, when our administrators all came back, we had a full day with them. So we prepared the data, we sat with them, talked through all the data, and went very in deep with all of these measures. Talked about at a district level what it looked like, and then at their building level what it looked like. And also, again, looked at trend data. So they knew for multiple years how their building was trending. From this, they, being the building administrators, were able to get a really good analysis of where they were struggling, where they needed to address their energies this year. And from this, they came up with building plans. And I'm going to show you some of those in just a second. But we had those important discussions, the deep analysis of the data with them on that day. And I think it was incredibly helpful. Got a lot of positive feedback that they understood, they got to the root of where they needed to focus. And then the last piece of this puzzle over the summer, early fall, is meeting with the steering committee. And that is the district leadership team, and the steering committee, those are the lucky group that develops what we called the OIP before. It's now an IIP. But I did the same data analysis, kind of showed them the report card again with this group. And this group is comprised of teachers, there's counselors, there's principals, there's central office, and kind of led them, they led me to the same discussions. Where are we seeing challenges? What stands out to you in this data? Where do we need to focus our energies? And looking at trend data as well. And what worked out well is all three groups came up with the same needs. It was very clear to us where we need to really focus our energies and what we're going to do about some of these things we're seeing. So from this, we developed this 3-year plan that I'm going to show you as well. And even though it's a 3-year plan, we know we need to start now. We need to start addressing things now. But in order to systematically and systemically make it happen, we have to be very thorough in how we roll this out. So you'll see a very specific timeline. That's what Mr. Ryba showed you earlier, where we know exactly when each piece of the puzzle is fitting. All right, these are the two major themes that we came out from the data. English language arts concerns throughout the district, and that involves reading and writing, and that's a pre-K through 12 issue. So that's a main one that we saw. In addition, the subgroup gaps. So our students with disabilities and our African American students and some of those other subgroups are not performing, and they're also not seeing growth as they should. So between all three groups that I just showed you, these are the main concerns we came out with. And this is what we decided as a district that we need to focus our energies on. So after we had our themes, again, we met with the administrators for that full day, and what we came out with is that the buildings are going to develop their own building plans. So it's called a building instructional plan. What we wanted this to be was a unique, targeted plan for the building. So it wasn't something that, we could easily have given them a template and said, you need to do these things in your buildings. However, that wouldn't necessarily address the needs and the specific challenges that their buildings face. So the principals, in all 8 buildings, came up with a targeted plan that would address the unique needs and situations that they saw in their data. Again, they didn't use solely the report card data that I just showed you, but again, trend data. So they know that this is an ongoing theme. And from that, these plans, they get guidance and oversight from central office. So they initially met with us, they shared their ideas. We gave them feedback, guidance, talked about what we felt, would be strong, maybe gave some suggestions as far as evidence-based. How are you going to show us that you're doing these things, that you're making progress? And we will meet with these principals of the buildings 4 times, probably more than 4, but at least quarterly. And we have our first one on Friday. And what that entails is each building, whether it's one principal or maybe 5 in the case of the high school, they come and meet with Colt and they talk with us, they share with us their plan. What are we doing in the building to address our major issues? And for the most part, it's their English language arts. We did ask them to have that focus, but there are some areas in which they added additional items as well. So like I said, on Friday, we'll talk about that with them. How can we help you as central office? You're not on your own. What can we do to support you? And then also, how is your building leadership team involved? Because we don't want it to just be top down. We don't want the principals just going in and saying, here's what we're doing, we need to get this done. But we need teachers to understand the rationale behind it as well. So here is kind of a summation of what I just said. We have unique plans for each building. They're working through their leadership teams in order to achieve these objectives. These are a 1-year plan. So this is intended to be accomplished by the end of this school year. Prevalent English language arts focus. We do have coaches that we utilize through Colt to help with different building teams as they need it. And again, that's all grounded in data, looking at kind of the root cause and then as well as trends and where they need to focus their energies. Because we all know trying to do too much with not a lot of depth doesn't get us too far. And I just want to show you an example. We have an elementary one. I know the type is small, but I kind of want to highlight for you. They're targeting, this is their 4th objective, so they're more than one objective. This is this building's 4th, targeting English language arts and students identified as economically disadvantaged. So this building saw a huge disproportionate scoring in economically disadvantaged to their subgroup of all kids. So some of the things they listed that they were going to do for action steps, identifying the kids, providing the interventions, tracking the data, making the changes based on interventions and what they're seeing. And then that last column, that's the real important one. How are we measuring it? So it's great to say all of this stuff we're going to do, but we need to see, is it working? And not just we, but they at the building need to see it, teachers need to see it, and the kids are the ultimate successors of this. So we have 5 criteria there demonstrating how we're going to actually know if this is working or not. And as they meet with us those 4 times a year, we can revamp this. We can look at it if we say that it's not working, this is not what we intended, we can change this up. But the important component is addressing our objective. What do we want to fix? And how are we going to get there? And how is it going to benefit the kids? And an example of the high school, this one's a little different in that they target for their objective on this one, English language arts, but then also Algebra 1 and geometry, because those were 2 areas in which the principals felt that they could boost the scores more. And remembering that English language arts isn't just their reading class. You know, it permeates the entire curriculum. So looking at reading in content areas, writing across the curriculum. And there's a lot here, but very similar to the elementary, they have specific criteria that they can measure to determine if this is working. So all of those action steps, are they seeing the payout? And if not, what are we going to do differently to make that happen? Okay, the other piece of this, again, we had our themes of language arts and subgroups. The steering committee, that's the district leadership team. We, as the steering committee, developed that instructional innovation plan. And we've talked about this. It used to be called the OIP. That kind of has a negative connotation. We're not forced to do it. We want to do that because it's good for the district. It is going to propel us to that elite premier district that we want to be. So this is the graphic on the right-hand side, which you will see all around the building. I see there's one over here as well. That is the summation of what our plan is. And very similar to, or the same as the board goal of student achievement, we have supporting the achievement and growth of all students. We have 4 pillars there that address curriculum, instruction, supports, and assessment. And it literally took us 6 months to get to this. We had many iterations of the plan. We went round and round, and we really wanted to hone in on not just, we wanted to be innovative on this plan. So our last plan, if you remember, it had a lot of different steps, and a lot of it was kind of compliance, perfunctory. We needed to get up to pace. This is different. This is, we're at a good place. Now, what are we going to do that extra step so that we become the premier district? What are those extra components we need to enhance in order to get us there? So we have one goal, 4 focus strategies, and this goes deep rather than the other one, which was, they say a mile wide and an inch deep. This one is thorough, in depth, those 4 areas it covers. And not only is it rolled out from the steering committee, it was then rolled out to the district leadership team, which has ownership from every building, as teacher ownership, administrative ownership. And then the next level, this is where we are now with it, they're taking it back to their buildings. And they're rolling this out to the buildings so that buildings, again, the teachers understand it. They have kind of a skin in the game with it. They understand the importance of it. What are the steps that are going to take us to this next level? As I may or may not have said it, but there are 25 steps, 25 action steps. Last time I think we had 75-ish, so it's much pared down from the last one. And I just pulled one example strategy and action step to show you. Again, just to give you the overall gist, this is strategy 4. It has the goal statement of we're going to have an aligned curriculum, evidence-based practices, we're going to have supports in place, and basically the bottom line, we want achievement and growth for all of our kids. So the strategy is to use assessments and then data to shape in practices. So what are we teaching the kids? Is it working? Are they getting it? If not, what are we doing about it? And how do we know? So this talks about actually the ongoing professional development that Mr. Ryba referenced before. And part of what we're doing to enhance that for teachers. So making sure that the PD is there to understand the different types of assessments, to get the kids used to that online component. And that's what Jane had brought up earlier as well. It's a big difference going from paper to online. And we don't want to just stick the kids on the computer in March or April and say, good luck. We want to have that, the rollover and kind of the progress of getting them there prior to. So we have the resources, and then we have the evaluation criteria, which is always important. Again, how do we know that what we're doing is working? So this was just one example here. We have quite a few. As we said, we have 4 goals and I think 25 action steps. A couple other things that we're doing, maybe not so much at the building level, but this is, I would say, district level. And a lot of this is what you see in Mr. Ryba's 2020 plan. You see it in kind of our individual plans. First one, establishing these benchmarks. So we've talked about, we don't want to just put all of our weight on this one test one time a year and say whether we're a good or bad district based on this test. What we need to do is establish internal benchmarks and criteria, so we know along the way, are our kids on target, throughout the year? Do we know if they're falling behind? Do we know if they're making gains? So this is one thing that we're working on already, to establish these internal benchmarks. That way we can monitor progress as the year rolls on. We should know before we get test scores back, for the most part, how our kids are going to do on them.
With what means? How are we going to gather the information to evaluate the benchmarks?
We have, we're working on actually compiling that list as we speak, but we have, common assessments are a huge one. So we're looking at, within departments, within grade levels, we're giving rigorous assessments, and we're having the same one across, all biology classes. So when they get together, then the bio teachers look at the questions, they look at how the students did, and they can tell, where are we struggling? Where do we need to intervene? Why did maybe this group of kids get it much better than this group? And how can we reteach that? So we have that. We have like AimsWeb, if you're familiar with that. We get immediate feedback from AimsWeb. So 3 times a year in the elementaries through grade 6, we progress monitor. And it tells us where the kids are in relation to, you can use the rest of the country, you can use all of Strongsville, you can use the building. And then it gives them a target. And so we know if the child is on target and making those gains throughout the year. So we look at that, we provide the interventions for that, and we continue to progress monitor, and then we benchmark 3 times a year.
Karen,
Yes, go ahead.
is this purely an internal product, or have we benchmarked off of some of these supposedly A schools?
Again, we haven't finalized this yet. Mr. Ryba, if you want to speak to this a little bit more.
Yeah, some of them, so when we talk about AimsWeb, that's local and national, so we can choose the benchmark to what we want it to be, and typically we score higher locally than on a national level.
I'm not talking about the testing, Cameron, I'm talking about your program.
I think like what we're using for 9th grade, are they on track? If, when they enter 9th grade, are they on track to
Right,
graduate?
so, one of the models we've taken this from is another district that is one that we consider a premier district, where they look at, by kindergarten, students should have this skill by
That's my
4th
question.
grade. So yes, we've modeled it off of other districts that we're aspiring to work towards.
Okay, modeling, benchmarking,
Yep.
yeah, it's good word for copy.
And will we have a progress, will we hear of a progress to this plan prior to getting those grades again in, 10 months now, 9 months?
What we hope, it's not all going to be able to be done this year. This will be able to be done, but it takes time to get assessments, local assessments that are reliable and valid. So we want to look at that correlation of predictability to say, on our 4th quarter common assessment, if 85% of our kids passed, there's a delta of maybe 2 percentage points that we know that our state assessment scores are going to be anywhere from that 83 to 87% passage rate. So we have built in the past few years, and we're honing in those local assessments, but now we've got to match them to the rigor of the state assessments and to be able to use that as a predictive value. So what we'll have this year is the foundation built. What will take a few years to do is to enhance those assessments to be more closely aligned to the state, so they're more predictive rather than a wider span of a guess.
Okay, thank you.
Second one is what we've talked about, teacher-based team coaches, and that's been brought up here. What we're doing is basically utilizing some of our best teachers to go into teacher-based teams, which is the group of teachers looking at data, helping them. Do they need assistance with looking at the data or talking about interventions or tracking the students, and kind of giving them that coaching mentality, kind of that lending hand, if you will, until they really get the process down. So we have that we're just starting to implement. We've trained TBT coaches. They've been through, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 sessions, but they're going to be fully trained so that it's not just somebody plopping into the meeting and sitting down with them, but they know what they're doing. It's very data-driven and oriented. Third one on here, we are using action research teams, and what that consists of, our building administrators and our directors, all of our administration, are focusing and researching a particular topic, whether it's curriculum, whether it's assessment, and really becoming what I'll call experts in that area. And what that does is alleviates one principal, any of us, from having to know a great depth about all areas. So if we need something, for example, a rigor specialist, can you tell us if our common assessments are rigorous? We have a group of 2 to 4 people, principals, on this team that are really digesting the information, coming up with a way that they are able to help other buildings, other principals. And this is relatively new. We started it this year, or really the end of last year. But our hope is that we have a lot of experts within the district across many topics that are important to us and that will be important and relevant to other buildings, teachers, and staff. A couple other things, as we talked about the targeted professional development, they actually align to the 4 pillars. So the 4 pillars of the IIP are color-coded. I don't know if you noted in the book, they actually align. So you know which one is curriculum, which one is assessment. We have weekly meeting times for our teacher-based teams, and that's really important because that is, if you look at research, that's when you get the most gain and growth in your teachers. So it's time for them to look at those common assessments, break down the data, look at where students are struggling, what interventions are we putting in place, what assessments do we have, how do we intervene, how do we enrich, how do we reassess and then look at the data again. We have our building technology coaches, which are also new this year under the leadership of Vicki Turner. And their charge this year is to work with teachers on technology and formative assessments. So kind of take away some of to make it more effective when teachers are grading. So how can they use technology to maybe create a form that students can quickly answer and they can look at the data?
Yeah,
So
are we
that-
putting our tests online?
We are.
Okay.
So that teachers are spending less time grading, but actually getting time to look at that data, digest the data, do, sub-item analysis of it. And they are working to put tests online, exactly. And last one I have, each administrator has a developed work plan. That's kind of part of our evaluation. And we, again, used identified needs. So it became, what did we see in this data? What have we seen over the last few years that we know are areas of concern? And what can we address in our departments? So just as an example, I wanted to highlight a few things on this one because I know they are important with regards to the ELA. And since it falls under curriculum, a district writing plan grades pre-K through 6. That is something that's in the works for this year to be rolled out next year. We have a writing rubric for grades 6 through 12, so that we are all grading writing the same way. And that needs to be rolled out, provided with some PD, so teachers are aware of it and feel comfortable using that. A host of other items there, most of them focusing though on, all of them focusing on our instructional plan, or IIS, as well as the data we've talked about. So really what that leads us to is we have district plans, we have building plans, we have individual plans, but they all tie together. And this is just kind of a graphic representing, you know, the strong 2020 plan, your board goals that we talk about every meeting, our innovation plan, the building improvement plan, all of those tie in together, and we are looking to utilize the conjunction of these to propel us forward. We do want to be that premier district. We do believe that we have that capability. We just need to tailor, target, have focused goals and strategies, and that's where we're lending, that's where we're leading, I should say. And show you one more thing. This was a suggestion that I received, and this kind of goes with the community involvement. Resource page, I just want to put this out here. It's a new page on our website, and at this point it's for elementary. We have a host of online instructional resources from all of our textbooks, for the most part, are online. So families can go to our main website, click on the For Families, either on the main page or on any of the schools, the elementary schools' web pages, and there's a section that says Elementary Instructional Resources. And what's really nice, and I love the suggestion, is that no matter which building you have students in, it's on the same place on the web. And so you can see we have our reading programs, our math programs, science, music, and so forth. And so parents know where to go, and they don't have to search around. So I do want to thank Jane for that suggestion. And I think it's going to be very helpful for families.
Aaron,
Yes.
as a father of 2 in the elementary buildings, those programs are a huge help.
Yeah.
I would not think that very many families are watching this program right now. I would hope they're not. But can we get that to the principals and have the
Absolutely.
principals, because I know that Kinzer does a really great job of sending those things out to the parents.
Uh-huh.
Just, let's not just tell them once. Sometimes you need to tell them
Reiterating.
2 or 3 times in a little blurb, because that's a huge help, especially for my 5th grader going into reading words and working through stuff. I mean, so if we could just have our schools mention this to their parents a few times, it'd be great.
Sure will.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Questions for Aaron?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to you and to all the administrators for this, obviously a huge amount of work. Second thing is, I like the way you said things tonight in plain English. Reading through some of that stuff, which I know Cameron eats it up, he loves all those complicated, but let's make sure, I think it would be a good suggestion anyway, to keep it in plain English of what you're trying to do, like when you talked about the kids and
Yeah.
how you're getting them to achieve. And the third thing I was gonna say was, I have a suggestion.
Okay.
In my life experience, the earlier a child learns to read and read proficiently, the better they do throughout their educational career. So I think it's important that we get a real hard focus, starting at preschool
Yeah.
through 3rd grade. I mean, a bigger focus than we have now. We really need to teach those kids to read and read well. And whatever resources it takes to do that, that would give them the foundation they need for the rest of their school career and their life.
I agree.
You know, and the writing, all the other
Right.
ELA stuff would follow from that if they can read well. So I think that's where we really, really need a hard focus and a lot of effort in the coming year.
Okay.
Just a
Appreciate that.
suggestion.
Yes, thank you.
Agreed. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
We do
Sure.
have one item. Do you have the agenda up
I
there?
do.
Okay. You would just want to go through your one item?
Yes, so one item under curriculum, and this is just a correction to the June 30th agenda. We wanted to add a new $15 fee for Art 6, grade 6 art. And that was just something that hadn't been put onto the fees because of the change in moving the students up to the middle school.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Any discussion? George, take call.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes,
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
excellent. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Cameron.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. That gets us the Board of Education and other. We do have another, I know we have at least one other. I'll keep all others short. Second, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm very, very pleased to announce, with the help of Mr. Ryba and Mr. Riachi and several other people, we do have our new flag in place at the high school, our 70-foot flagpole and our 15 by 25-foot flag. Will be flying as a preview on this Friday's homecoming game. So we hope that the residents will really enjoy the symbol of patriotism that we have up there now. It's a great, great improvement over the previous flag, which was kind of a very small toothpick of a pole. And we also are planning for a formal dedication ceremony at the last home game of the season on the 28th, where we will have a dedication ceremony for not only our flag, but our POW MIA seat. And hopefully, we're going to have our Air Force Junior ROTC cadets involved, as well as members of the local VFW post. And all Strongsville residents, it's the Brunswick game, so come show your spirit. I know Dan would want a green and white Friday there, and we'll go from there. But we're really looking forward to it. It looks great. You can actually see it from Pearl Road.
Excellent. Nice job, Duke, and I know you did a lot for fundraising for that fully community-donated flagpole and
Yes.
flag.
Yeah, we'd like to thank our mayor and Kiwanis, and I think the, I don't know what I want to say,
Lions Club,
the Lions Club, yeah, and
VFW.
the VFW, and we had several businesses and organizations step up, and we really appreciate it.
Excellent. George?
I just want to mention tomorrow night, Petitti's, the Strongsville Rotary Club is holding their Taste in Strongsville, which is a wonderful event. All proceeds go to the Strongsville Food Bank, which is an important part of our community for those families who are in need. All that money is generated there. So I believe it's 6 to 10, but it's at Petitti's. We clear out one section of the greenhouse, and actually, with the help of George Schindler, who's part of Rosewood Grill in Blue Point, he brings in 20, 30 different restaurants, and they provide food and wine and everything else. So if you have any interest, please show up or give me a call. It's a wonderful event for a great charity.
Excellent.
Oh, just this weekend is PTA's Fill a Truck event at the high school. If you have any household goods or clothing, they're collecting that, and they get some proceeds as well as help out the Easter seals. And then the fire department wanted me to let people know next week is Fire Prevention Week and to change your smoke detector batteries, so.
Oh, what day is the fill a truck?
It starts Friday night and then goes Saturday.
Okay. All right. And then we also have the high school bonfire, isn't that
I think it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow.
tomorrow,
night.
Thursday
Yeah.
night, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Anybody else? All right. We do have need for executive session.
Under two items, to consider the employment of a public employee or official and to discuss details relative to the security arrangements and emergency response protocols for the Board of Education.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke.
Second.
Thank you, George. Any comment? Take roll.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes,
Motion passes. Enter an executive session.
at 8:55, and we will leave at 9:15. And we won't have any business afterwards.